The 1970s brought us some of the most iconic motorcycles ever built. Bikes so well engineered they're still tearing up the roads today. Here are 20 best motorcycles from the 1970s that last forever. New Honda MT-125R. The Honda MT-125R marked a bold comeback for Honda in road racing after more than a decade away. Debuting in 1977, it was a lightweight two-stroke machine with an air-cooled engine. Modest by today's standards, but impressive for its time. The original model offered 26 horsepower, and by 1978, Honda had pushed that up to 28. What made the MT-125R particularly clever was its connection to the CR-125 motocross bike. While the two shared the same shifting pattern, 1 down, 5 up, the MT-125R's rear set foot pegs required Honda to flip the shifter and add a special linkage, ensuring smooth gear changes for racers. Over time, Honda standardized the cylinder across both models, simplifying parts replacement, a blessing for mechanics. Still, some owners went a step further, swapping in a CR-125M engine. A quick giveaway? If the gears shifted the opposite way, a switch had likely been made. Today, the MT-125R is a collector's dream, and its value only grows with time. Norton Commando 850. The Norton Commando 850 hit the streets in 1973, but by then, it was starting to feel a bit old-fashioned. Its biggest rival, the Honda CB750, came with modern perks like an electric start and disc brakes, while the Commando kept things traditional, at least at first. Those updates did come later, though. What made the Commando 850 special was its ride. Smoother than the earlier 750cc model, it wasn't about blistering speed, but delivering a relaxed, confident feel that made long journeys a joy. One standout was the Interpol version, known for its rock-solid reliability, so much so that police forces trusted it for years. Its simplicity, strong engine, and tough 4-speed gearbox made it a dependable workhorse. Even today, you'll see these bikes cruising the UK. But like any classic, keeping it running smoothly takes a little extra care and attention. Ducati 750 SS-1972. Back in 1970, when Ducati introduced their new V-twin engine, no one imagined it would shape the brand for the next 50 years. But in 1972, everything changed with Ducati's stunning victory at the Imola 200. Riding that success, they built a street bike that was basically a race machine with lights, the legendary 750 SS, featuring the same innovative desmodromic valves. This bike was pure magic. Its bright turquoise-green frame, silver tank, and sleek bikini fairing made it look aggressive yet elegant. A clear strip in the tank let riders check the fuel level at a glance, while its long wheelbase, powerful disc brakes, and twin megaphone exhausts delivered a deep, thunderous roar. Rare and expensive back then, and even more so now, the 750 SS remains one of the best Italian motorcycle designs ever. Moto Guzzi 850. Le Mans, 1976. When Moto Guzzi introduced their engine in the late 60s, it was something truly different. And remarkably, it still is today. Only Honda dared to try something similar with their CX500. While the Japanese manufacturers were off perfecting their 4-cylinder machines, Guzzi took a page from Ducati's playbook and crafted a modern cafe racer, aiming to carve out a place in the sports bike world. The Le Mans 850 was long, low, and unmistakably Guzzi, with its distinct look and unique handlebars. More of a touring bike than a purebred racer, yet somehow it found its way to victory in several races during the 70s. It stuck around for a surprisingly long time, until 1992, and though Moto Guzzi never really built a direct successor, the Le Mans still turns heads today. Honda CX500. The Honda CX500 has real staying power, and even today, it's a favorite in the custom bike world. And it's easy to see why. On paper, it could supposedly hit 149 miles per hour. Its water-cooled, shaft-driven V-twin engine sat in a frame that, let's be honest, wasn't exactly eye-catching. But looks can be deceiving. What made the CX500 stand out was its reliability. Low maintenance, fun to ride, and more affordable than the collectible CB models. The engine? A 497 cubic centimeter, water-cooled V-twin, putting out a respectable 48 horsepower. But the turbo version? That cranked it up to a wild 82 horsepower. Plus, it was the first production bike with tubeless tires. Naturally, it came with Honda's legendary reliability and durability, and the price was right. It's definitely a bit of an oddball in the classic Honda lineup, but any of the 6 500cc versions will do you proud. Harley-Davidson XR750 1970. The Harley-Davidson XR750 isn't just a motorcycle. It's a legend. Some say it's the most successful race bike ever, and with its track record, that's a hard point to argue. But what makes its story so compelling is how rough the beginning was. When the XR750 first rolled onto the scene, it was far from impressive. Those iron cylinder heads turned the engine into a furnace, overheating constantly and breaking down more often than it finished a race. Winning? That wasn't even part of the conversation. Yet, Harley-Davidson wasn't about to back down. By 1972, they made the switch to aluminum barrels and heads, and from that moment on, the XR750 became a force of nature. Ducati 750 GT-1971. Why the 750 GT and not the more famous 750 Sport or Super Sport? Simple. The 750 GT was the first Ducati to roll out with that brand new V-twin engine. The very heart that's powered every Ducati since. It's the granddaddy of them all. With its wild metal flake paint, the glorious roar from those Conti mufflers, and handling that felt like pure magic, the 750 GT captured the essence of the 70s on two wheels. Sure, its V-twin didn't have Ducati's famous Desmo valves, but the race-prepped 750 GTs that Paul Smart rode to that unforgettable win at Imola in '72 did. And from that victory, it was hard to argue about how good this bike was, and it's no surprise it's still seen around today. BMW R90S-1973. Before the R90S, BMW's image was, to put it simply, a bit boring. Solid, reliable, but lacking excitement. Then came the R90S, and suddenly everything changed. This wasn't just a fast motorcycle. It was a machine with a frame that could handle the speed, offering both power and precision. And it didn't stop there. The sleek two-tone paint job and the striking bikini fairing were a bold departure from BMW's traditionally conservative design. Almost overnight, the company went from dependable to downright desirable. Riders took notice, and with 17,000 units sold in just 3 years, the numbers speak for themselves. Bimota. 1973 onwards. Back in the 1970s, the motorcycle world was shifting fast, and while this list focuses on specific bikes from that era, you just can't ignore Bimota. Picking just one model wouldn't do them justice. They were all ahead of their time. Japanese manufacturers were building amazing engines, but their frames often couldn't keep up. That's where Bimota stepped in. Founded by 3 friends, including Massimo Tamburini, the Ta in Bimota, the company became famous for fixing that problem. Tamburini, who later designed legends like the Ducati 916 and MV Agusta F4, helped create frames that turned these bikes into precision handling machines. Bimota took engines from Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Ducati and gave them beautifully handling frames, setting a new standard. Without Bimota, there might never have been some of the motorcycles you see today. Suzuki GS750. The Suzuki GS750 was Suzuki's first serious attempt at a 4-stroke motorcycle. Well, sort of. They had experimented with small 4-stroke engines back in the 1950s, but nothing that really turned heads. So, in 1976, Suzuki decided it was time to step up, unveiling the GS750 for the 1977 model year. Now the GS750 wasn't exactly groundbreaking. The 750cc four-cylinder engine was pretty standard for the time. But what set the GS750 apart was its handling. That double cradle frame gave it a solid, responsive feel on the road, earning respect among riders who understood that power was only half the equation. The GS750 might not have been the flashiest bike of its era, but it remains one of Suzuki's top-of-the-line four-stroke sport bikes even till today. Honda CBX, 1978. A proper list, of course, wouldn't be complete without the Honda CBX and its unmistakable six cylinders. Back in 1969, Honda had already shaken up the motorcycle world with the CB750, essentially creating the concept of the universal Japanese motorcycle. But by the late 70s, they decided to push the envelope even further. The result? The CBX, a machine that seemed almost excessive with its wild six-cylinder, 1,047 cubic centimeter engine. Sure, 105 horsepower might not sound like much by today's standards, but back then, this engine was something truly special. It wasn't just powerful, it was unbelievably smooth, with a sound that set it apart from the sea of Japanese four-cylinders of the era. The rest of the bike? Fairly standard, but that massive, wide engine. Now that was something people couldn't ignore, and even now, there's proof of that. MV Agusta 750 Sport America, 1975. This was pure Italian exotica, the kind they seemed to create without even trying. Based on the 750S, it got a styling boost thanks to some input from American importers who wanted a bike that looked even more like the Grand Prix machines ruling the early 70s. And the result? The 750 Sport America, with an engine so intricate it could only come from MV Agusta's racing heritage. Of course, that kind of pedigree didn't come cheap. It cost 3 times as much as a Honda CB750. A steep price, even if it was faster. And rare? Absolutely. Between 1966 and 1978, only 1,276 four-cylinder MV Agustas were built. So, while they're out there, spotting one today would be pretty rare. Kawasaki Z1000. The Z1000, or KZ1000, depending on where you lived, wasn't just a standout from the 70s. It was a legend on 2 wheels. It wasn't the absolute fastest bike of its time, but that hardly mattered. This was the bike to own. With its 1,015 cubic centimeter air-cooled four-cylinder engine, it packed a serious punch, delivering nearly 90 horsepower and pushing the machine to speeds of around 132 miles per hour. That kind of performance made it one of the quickest production motorcycles on the market, and its prowess wasn't confined to the streets. Naturally, police departments took notice. It made perfect sense. Fast, powerful, and undeniably stylish, even when transformed into a cafe racer. BMW R75/5. In 1970, BMW unveiled 3 motorcycles that would soon achieve legendary status: the 500cc R50/5, the 600cc R60/5, and the 750cc R75/5. These weren't just machines. They were statements of engineering excellence, quickly earning a reputation for reliability that few others could match. At the top of the line stood the BMW R75/5, the biggest and most desirable model of the series. It wasn't just about power, it was about presence. Riders were drawn to its exceptional handling, made possible by a low center of gravity and those unmistakable horizontally opposed cylinders, a design that kept the engine cool and the ride smooth. Add to that BMW's signature shaft drive, a quiet and low-maintenance alternative to the typical chain, and the R75/5 became more than a motorcycle. It became an experience. Even now, this bike looks and feels like a modern classic. Yamaha RD350. Back in the day, if you asked any rider what the coolest bike on the street was, chances are they'd say the RD350. It was fast, handled like a dream, and most importantly, it was pure, unfiltered fun. All at a price that made sense. Motorcycle journalists had a perfect nickname for it: the Giant Killer. And for good reason. Owners of bigger, pricier 750cc and 1000cc bikes lost sleep wondering how this little RD 350 kept humiliating them on twisty back roads. And it wasn't a fluke. It happened all the time. At its heart was a fierce 347 cubic centimeter two-stroke engine, pushing 39 horsepower and hitting around 105 miles per hour. But the real magic was in its handling. Quick to lean, quick to turn, and always ready to outrun the bigger bikes where it mattered most. But perhaps the best part? It is far cheaper than other sport bikes of its era, like the Ducati 750 SS. This means anyone with a passion for speed and racing can actually afford to own a piece of this thrill. Honda XL2501, one of the most recognizable of Honda's vintage off-road motorcycles, is the XL250, a true icon in Honda's dirt bike lineup. Introduced in 1972 and produced all the way through 1987, this bike made history. It wasn't just another off-roader. It was the first mass-produced motorcycle with 4 valves and the first modern 4-stroke enduro bike, setting the stage for the global enduro craze that followed. What made the XL250 so popular was its versatility. Riders didn't have to choose between the pavement and the dirt. This bike could do both. Whether cruising down a back road or tearing through a forest trail, it delivered freedom on 2 wheels. At its heart was a 250cc 4-stroke engine, producing 24 horsepower and nearly 17 pound-feet of torque. That was impressive power for the time, especially when packed into a remarkably narrow frame. Just 12 inches wide, not counting the handlebars. Weighing in at only 288 pounds, the XL250 was light, quick, and perfectly balanced, making it an ideal machine for anyone looking to dive into the world of enduro riding. Kawasaki H2 Mach 4750. The Kawasaki H models hold a legendary place in motorcycle history. These motorcycles paved the way for today's mind-blowing H2 and H2R, bikes that seem to exist somewhere between reality and a dream. But to really appreciate that legacy, you've got to rewind to 1972. That's when Kawasaki dropped the H2 Mach 4750. And it didn't just turn heads, it blew minds. The H2 was quite simply a beast. At its heart was a 748 cubic centimeter 3-cylinder 2-stroke engine, delivering a raw 74 horsepower and a mountain of torque. It could roar up to 120 miles per hour and crush a quarter mile in just 12 seconds. For its time, this was mind-blowingly fast, and that was straight from the factory. Naturally, enthusiasts wasted no time modifying it, pushing the bike even further into the realm of speed and adrenaline. But the H2 Mach 4750 wasn't perfect. Its predecessor, the H1, was known for blistering straight-line speed but notoriously poor handling. Kawasaki made an effort to improve this with the H2, adding a special steering damper, but even that wasn't enough. The bike still wobbled dangerously at high speeds and could be tough to control. Yet, for those who know what they are doing and have the right conditions, the H2 Mach 4 isn't just fast. It is thrillingly, dangerously fast. Yamaha XT500, 1975. The Yamaha XT500 was, in many ways, the original adventure bike. Long before anyone even knew what that meant. It's become a legend, thanks to its big, torquey engine, strong yet lightweight frame, and tall suspension. On top of that, it was surprisingly comfortable and handled beautifully, making it ideal for cruising up and down the West Coast. But this bike wasn't just about good looks and smooth rides. The head of Yamaha France saw something more. He believed the XT500 was perfect for the inaugural Paris-Dakar Rally in 1979. That race was brutal, nearly 6,000 miles across the unforgiving Sahara Desert. And the XT500 didn't just survive. It took first and second place, cementing its status as a legend, right alongside the race itself. Honda CB 750, 1969. Even though it came out way back in 1969, the Honda CB750 completely changed the motorcycle world in the 70s and beyond. That's why we had to include it. Some people even call it the most important motorcycle ever made. And honestly, they might be right. It was the first modern superbike, and it set the standard for what we're riding today. This Japanese bike didn't just make waves, it caused a storm. It shook up the British motorcycle industry, making them nervous on their own turf. Now, while it wasn't the only reason the British industry struggled, the CB750 showed everyone what a motorcycle could be. Reliable, smooth, clean, and fast. Everything British bikes at the time weren't. It might not have been the very first four-cylinder motorcycle, but many still consider the CB750 one of the greatest motorcycles ever made. And because of that, it's no wonder it hasn't gone out of existence. Laverda 100 Jota 1976. Laverda's Jota was a beast, a massive, powerful bike that proved a small Italian company could take on the big Japanese manufacturers and win. It all started with their 981 cubic centimeter 3C, a motorcycle with some serious character. Its triple-cylinder engine had double overhead camshafts, but what really set it apart was the crankshaft.